What is going on, everybody? I'm AJ, and I'm going to give you guys the DraftKings breakdown for UFC Vegas 21. Before doing that, two things I'd like to let you guys know about. One of them is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy site on the market with 100% instant deposit bonus up to $100. That is available on the link below in the description. Use promo code AJ100 for that instant deposit bonus. PrizePicks is the most straightforward fantasy game on the market. And the only one with that 100% instant deposit bonus, regarded as the best in the industry. Basically, think of PrizePicks when you actually play it as a game with no optimizers. There's no sharks, there's no fish, there's no mass multi-entries. It's just you versus a projection. So think of it as like you're inputting an entry, a fantasy prop, or a pick'em type game, to where it's essentially, definitely a more even playing field than playing against those guys that have access to all those different data points and whatnot. PrizePicks is available across most areas in North America, with more to come. It's available on the Apple App Store and Google Play. So PrizePicks, check it out. Again, promo code AJ100 available in the link in the description below. Another one is RotoWire. RotoWire 10-day free. Yes, free 10-day trial. It is a company that obviously I contribute to, but even before I started contributing to RotoWire, I was using their daily fantasy tools and resources. And let me tell you, it's helped me tremendously. Like, I used to be one of those people, I need to be like, I don't need this stuff. It's just some money. I could keep track of it myself. It saves you so much time and stress, to where I'm right now making lineups just a few minutes before lineups lock. I don't have to worry about all keeping track of all this injury news and whatnot. I'm able to confidently make my lineups because of all the data points and resources that RotoWire has available, literally within minutes. It's easy. It reduces stress a lot. And, most importantly, you get to play the game and win, right? And do so with conviction. So again, 10-day free trial. So if you do try this out, link in the description below, and you find out it's not for you after 10 days, fair play to you. I mean, you could just move on to the next thing if you want after that trial. So yeah, check them out if you want. Links in the description below for both of those. We're here to talk about the DraftKings slate for UFC Vegas 21, right? And we'll just talk about some plays here that stick out to me, kind of like I did in my written breakdown here, which I sent out to you all. It's pinned to my Twitter, pinned tweets. And yeah, we're just going to get right down to business. So some fighters that stick out to me a lot for tournaments: Jourdain, 9,100. I really like him for tournaments because of his inside distance line. He's facing a fighter who's making his UFC debut on short notice. He's fought mainly on the regional scene. Jourdain's shown to be a potent finisher, both in the striking and grappling exchanges here. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt is Jourdain. He's a very dynamic striker. He is a guy that I think is risky, but a risk I'm willing to take in tournaments. Yahya at 92, he's a guy that I like in both formats, GPPs and cash games. He's a guy that I'd say is safe based on his, chances to win per the betting odds, but also his wins inside the distance line. He's also facing another fighter who is very, very inexperienced at the UFC level. He's facing a fighter who has been submitted in his most recent losses. Yahya is an excellent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. I think he has the capability of going out here, taking this fight to the ground and getting a quick submission. And so that's my reason for targeting him. I like his upside. I like his safety. And he's a guy I'm willing to target. Leon Edwards at 9K. He's more of a cash game play for me than a GPP. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do still like Leon for GPPs, but why I like him more for cash is the safety, with some added upside. 5 rounds to work with instead of 3. That's why I do think he's a bit better of a play than Jonathan Martinez, who's essentially going to go out there and do the same thing in terms of strike. But I think Edwards has a bit more grappling upside there, but Edwards has 2 extra rounds to work with. He's the main event favorite. I look to get the main event favorite in my cash game lineups when it makes sense. There's weeks where that doesn't happen, but on a week like this, where I really, really want to get these fighters that I feel good about in my cash games, Leon Edwards is a guy that I really like. Darren Stewart at 8,900. I'm just not really interested in him for DraftKings this week. He's facing a guy in Eric Anders who has historically shown to be very tough to finish. And it's not like Stewart has this crazy high inside distance line. So I'm going to be pretty much off of him from a DraftKings perspective. Gloria de Paula, 8,800. The odds don't really back this up, but I actually think that from a research perspective, she's got the capability of going out here and finishing this fight both on the feet and on the ground. She seems like a very dangerous fighter, throws hard, has good variety, a threatening submission grappling. She's going to have some physicality here on Jinh Yu Frey. So at 8,800, I think she's going to be a sneaky, low-owned tournament play that I am interested in. And depending on how these odds shift here, she might be even a cash game for me, just based off the fact that if she's a bigger favorite than, say, some fighters priced above her, she becomes a value play for me. Just like anybody else that's priced below a certain fighter but has better chances to win, those fighters become odds value plays, right? Mantle Cape at 8,700. I mean, he's a tournament play for me for sure. Good inside distance line, one of the better ones on the card. He's a dangerous striker, and there's a chance that people might be a little low on him here, right? You know, we saw him not too long ago in his UFC debut against Pantoja, where we know Pantoja's a good fighter and everything, but I think people were a bit underwhelmed by the lack of output by Kopp. But Kopp is still a dangerous striker. He's still very athletic, light on his feet, throws very hard. And Nicolau, for as talented of a fighter as he is, he has still been stopped via strikes in a couple of his losses. The most noteworthy one was Dustin Ortiz. He was knocked down from a blocked head kick, and he was finished there. Kopp hits very, very hard. So I would not be shocked to see Kopp go out here, get a knockout. That is my rationale for targeting him to some extent in GPPs. Danny Ige at 8,600. You know, the odds don't really put me on him a crazy amount at 8,600 just because he doesn't have a strong inside distance line. But Dan has 5 inches of reach on Tucker. There's always this chance that maybe this is a levels fight. Maybe Tucker isn't ready for this step up in competition. This is a big step up for Tucker. I do think he's ready, but the rationale for this play is Dan hits hard. And we have seen Tucker hurt in at least 2 of his UFC fights, right? Against Glenn, against James, and potentially against Quarantillo there as well. So there's enough there where I don't want to go crazy on Dan in tournaments, but I like him more than JJ Aldrich. I like him more than Darren Stewart. I like him more than Angela Hill, where I'm like, okay, not my favorite play on the card, but a guy I do want some low to moderate exposure of just because of that upside factor. JJ Aldrich at 8,500. Like I alluded to, just not a fighter that I want a lot of exposure to, just low output generally, has a very unlikely chance of finishing this fight. Just not too interested in her at that price point. Mattheus Semelsberg, at the other hand, 8,400. He's a guy that has 5 inches of reach here. He's a solid striker, throws at a high pace, and we have seen Witt hurt in many of his pro MMA losses, right? He got stopped by Sasaki. Semelsberger seems like he packs a punch. I do think his upside is mostly tied to that knockout, but that said, I do want to target him for that reason. Misha Serkinov at 8,300, right? I mean, this is the fight between Misha Serkinov and Ryan Spahn is just a fight I want both sides of. A lot of exposure to both fighters. I just think a finish is very likely to materialize here. The odds suggest that the under 1.5 rounds is minus money on the under. So it is a fight I want both sides of. Misha, I think, could get a finish on the feet or on the ground. Spahn just is very stationary on the feet. And Cirkunov is a very high level submission grappler offensively. We've seen Spahn taken down in the past against Clark, against Henik. Cirkunov is a very good guard passer. We saw him get the mounted crucifix position on a guy like Jim Crute. Very impressive. Cirkunov is a guy who's a risk, but he's a guy that's also a big reward should he win. But if Spahn wins, Spahn is also a very intriguing play for me too, because I have to think it's by finish here. And at 7,900, that's interesting to me. Cirkunov has been finished in all of his pro MMA losses. There's enough intrigue there with Spahn to where I do want some exposure to him. Honorable mention, we don't have salaries out the time of recording this, but Nasrat Haqparast here, taking on a short notice UFC newcomer. This is a fight where I do want some exposure to Haqparast. Wherever he's priced, it'll be interesting. He'll probably be one of the higher priced fighters on the card, but this is a fight where it could very well just be a levels fight. And I'm very high on Haqparast, as are a lot of people. So he is a guy that I also am eyeing for GPPs and cash games. Just popped in my head. Jason Witted, 7,800, excuse me. I am interested in him a little bit. There is footage of Semelsberger getting taken down prior to coming to the UFC. I think he's gotten better since, but it is still a risk. Witt still seems to grapple well. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. He's got a power double leg. I wouldn't be shocked to see Witt go out here and land takedowns if Semelsberger hasn't tightened up that grappling. He's one of the more likely underdogs to win on the card. Witt is a guy I am interested in for DraftKings. Courtney Casey, not so much. If I were to target one fighter or the other on this card for DraftKings, it would be her for the salary saving, but it's still not a fight that I'm big on. I just think a finish is unlikely to materialize. And with DraftKings' new scoring system, we really want to prioritize the grapplers, the fighters that have a strong win inside the distance line. And Casey's main way of winning this fight, I think, is like a volume-based decision here. I just don't see her submitting Aldrich, who's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. I think it's going to be contested on the feet, where I'm just not that big on the fight as a whole, though I would prefer Casey. Gavin Tucker at 7,600, I like him as an underdog. In a slate like this, where there's a few underdogs with solid chances to win per the betting odds, Tucker is a guy that I am interested in. He's I'd say not the most likely guy to win inside the distance out of all the underdogs. Certainly not as likely as a guy like Ryan Spahn. But Tucker fights at a very high pace. He's coming off a performance against Billy Quarantillo where he landed 7 takedowns, over 100 significant strikes. Ige does have that willingness to be on his back, and you don't want to do that against a guy like Tucker, who's a very solid scrambler and grappler. So Gavin Tucker, for me, despite me thinking that if he wins, it's by decision, he's actually a guy that I'm interested in just due to the high pace that he fights at, not just in terms of the striking, but the wrestling as well. So he is a guy that I like, as is Matteus Nicolau. Look, I was on Alexandre Pantoja against Manuel Cape, and I didn't really get that many questions answered there. Part of the reason for that bet was Cop showed a lot of defensive grappling liabilities prior to coming to the UFC, getting taken down, even in fights that went to decision, nearly getting finished, getting put in the mounted crucifix position, getting controlled for large stretches. Matteus Nicolau, I don't think he's a great wrestler, but he's a very good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. If he gets in top position on Manuel Cop, I think there's a potential he could establish control and potentially get a finish. So this is actually a fight where I do like exposure to both sides. I'm not as big on it as Cirkunov and Spawn, but it is a fight that I still do like exposure to both fighters. I think Nicolau is a very live underdog, and I think that if he does win, there's a decent chance it could be even by submission, right? So I am big on that fight. Not so big on Jinyu Frey from a DraftKings perspective. She's just generally a low output fighter. I'm just not that big on her for DraftKings at 7,400. Same thing with Eric Anders, just not that big on him, just a low output fighter. They're both live underdogs in a sense, but there's just other underdogs I'd rather target because they have just as good, if not better, chances to win per the betting odds, but I think better chances to win or to score well should they win. So they're just not underdogs that I'm really prioritizing on this slate. Bilal Muhammad at 7,200. I mean, he's in the main event, which is intriguing in that sense, but I just think that Leon Edwards is the better fighter everywhere. I don't want to typically invest in these underdogs on DraftKings that are big betting underdogs because the odds makers like letting us know, hey, this guy doesn't have a good chance to win. And based off that, how much do I really want to invest in these guys? Don't get me wrong. I still invest in them some, but I still want to limit my exposure to them. So Muhammad's okay in the sense that he's in the main event and he's an underdog, but I think that stylistically it's a good fight for Leon. So I'm going to have very limited exposure to Bilal Muhammad. I'm not that interested in Marcelo Rojo, though I would actually prefer him over Bilal Muhammad. I would prefer him over Ray Rodriguez and also Ashley Yoder. I just feel like if he wins, even though it's not a great chance per the betting odds, there's a decent chance it's by finish. Jourdain is just very wild. There are times when he fights composed, but he's been an inconsistent fighter, relatively speaking, in his UFC career. So Rojo would actually be a guy that I would be willing to take a flyer on more so than some of these other fighters in this range. Ray Rodriguez, just not too interested in him. The case would be maybe this is the fight where Yahya, we just see some regression all of a sudden. He's been fighting since 2002 as Yahya. He's 36. But again, it's more so just a narrative rather than what we actually know. So I would rather invest in Yahya in that matchup. I just think it's a solid spot for him. Of course, if making 150 lineups, all these fighters become a consideration, but I have a respect for prioritization. Even if I got to Rodriguez, it's just not a guy that I would really want a lot of exposure to. Same thing with Davey Grant at 6,900. I mean, look, I think him and Ashley Yoder are okay for cash in the sense that both of their fights are likely to go to decision. They both could score 30-ish points in a loss, and where they're priced at, it allows me to pay up for the fighters that I want more in that 9K range. So that's why they're okay for me for cash. But again, they're just not that likely to win per the betting odds and per my analysis. So based on that, they're just not fighters that I want to invest heavily in from a DraftKings perspective. And so that's kind of my thoughts there. That's kind of what I do for every DraftKings slate is I want to prioritize the fighters that I think have solid chances to win. And solid chances to score well if they win. Of course, variance does happen. We get some surprises here and there, but I do feel like generally I'm putting myself in the best position possible by kind of adapting that sort of thought process and see where the chips fall. Because again, at the end of the day, it's MMA. Nothing really surprises me with this crazy high action sport. So that is the concise DraftKings breakdown for this event. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. You guys can follow me on Twitter at AJ_SCHULLO. If you are a regular watcher of this channel and haven't yet subscribed, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Also feel free to hit the like button and leave a nice comment if you do so choose. Just have one bet place for the event in the description below. Details could be accessed for the bet, the breakdown by subscribing to the mailing list at ajmmabetting.com. Thank you guys so much for the support and best of luck.